What's up guys, and welcome back to another Pokemon Sun and Moon coverage video. And in today's video I am going to be speculating on the main legendary duo slash trio from Sun and Moon. We don't know what they are yet, we don't know anything about them basically, but we can assume they will be related to the Sun and the Moon. So we're going to go off of that, and I'm going to sort of speculate on what the typing may be, the ability, the stats I expect, all predictions, all speculation guys, but it's always good to have a discussion about this sort of thing, because then when they actually come along we can be surprised again. So that's what I'm going to go through there. Feel free to leave your thoughts on these legendaries down below in the comment section, let me know what you think about what I'm saying, and then also give your own thoughts as well and say, well, I think this is the most likely type, this is, this might be the ability, etc, etc, etc. So we're going to start off with the Sun legendary because Pokemon Sun comes first. Here is some random fan art of a Pokemon Sun legend, so, just a placeholder. But the typing for a Sun legendary, we got to assume that fire is going to be one of the types, because the Sun is on fire. Obviously that's not a scientifically correct term, I know, but that's what I'm going with. But the Sun is fiery, so fire is almost definitely going to be one of the types there. However, the other thing is, what's the secondary type going to be? I don't feel like it can't just be pure fire. That just doesn't make sense. Just for a Sun legendary, it doesn't make enough sense. It makes sense for a fire type Pokemon, for like Charmander. It makes sense because it's fire type, it's breeze fire, etc. But for a Sun, it doesn't quite seem awesome enough, I guess. So I've got two types listed here. One is Fire Fairy, and the other is Fire Psychic. Fire Fairy because the fairy types, it's sort of described as being like bright, and the sun is bright and everything like that. And the psychic type because, it just is a good complement to the fire type. Fire and psychic, the sun gives off a lot of solar radiation, psychic sort of links into that and intertwines into there, so it does make sense in some sort of context. There's not really any other type apart from these two you could really add on it. What would you add to it? Fire Dark, that makes no sense for a Sun. Fire Dragon, again, makes no sense for a Sun at all. Unless of course both legendaries are going to be, part dragon, for example, which I doubt they do because we've had enough dragons already, but you guys get the idea there. So Fire Fairy and Fire Psychic are the ones I feel like are most likely. I would like to see Fire Psychic rather than Fire Fairy, mainly because I have ideas for the Moon legendary we'll look at in a minute, and I need to have Fairy in it. But those are the types for the Sun legendary. What ability could the Sun legendary have? Well, the first one you might come to mind is Drought. Drought obviously is Groudon's ability as well as Mega Charizard Y, so it's not it's not unique to Groudon. Drought obviously makes it very sunny, which would make sense because there's a lot of sun. The only reason I say not Drought is because what would the equivalent for the Moon legendary be? Or does it make the moon shine, I mean, we have Moonlight as a move, which obviously heals health points, but it's not an ability of any sort, so it doesn't work in that sort of sense. So my other idea would be a new ability, because, legendaries usually have new abilities, they don't reuse old ones, but a new ability that is related to day, and would, something along the lines of boost the power of this legendary during the daytime, which make a lot of sense, because you have the same sort of thing for the Moon legendary. So during the daytime, the Sun legendary, because the sun is shining, has increased power, and the opposite is at night, because the moon is shining, the Moon legendary has extra power. So that makes a lot of sense there in my opinion, and that's sort of what I'm expecting it to be, some sort of day ability that boosts power of some description. Then moving on to looking at stats for the Sun legendary. Just sort of thinking about a Sun legend makes me think high special attack, high speed, possibly high special defense as well, and a low physical defense. I feel like it's going to be a very, strong Pokemon, a lot of high special attacks. Special attack makes more sense than physical attack because obviously if it's using fire as its main type, fire is more of a special type than the physical one. So special attack being high would make a lot of sense. Speed would make a fair bit of sense as well. Light does travel fast, and that's the sun's main power, I guess. Obviously the moon has technically the same power because the moon is just the sunlight reflected. However, of course, on the reflection, the light from the sun is not as strong, when it's coming off of the moon, hence why the moon isn't as bright. So that would make a lot of sense why the Moon legendary might be a bit slower than this one. But again, I also expect low defense for this Sun legendary because it just doesn't seem, thinking about it, what I imagine, what I envisage would be, a very sort of not a weak Pokemon, but a light, a very thin, I try to think of the word to describe it, a slim, thin Pokemon that can move about, is nice and fast, and can deal out damage, but can't really take too many attacks. Similar to this Fakemon design, because it's not really bulky at all, it's more a Pokemon you would imagine flying around and doing damage, basically. So that's the Fire Legendary. Be sure to let me know what you think of those ideas and any ideas of your own down below in the comment section. If we move out onto the Moon Legendary, did I say Fire Legendary? I meant Sun Legendary, but it's pretty much the same thing. The Moon Legendary here, same sort of fan out there. What type would the Moon Legendary be? Well, there are many other choices here. The first three are Dark Ice, Dark Water and Dark Rock. Dark because obviously the moon is generally out at night when it's dark. Obviously the moon itself is not dark since it reflects light from the sun, but the moon itself actually is dark because there's no light coming off of it. But you'd have ice because obviously the moon is colder than the earth, so you can imagine ice would make a lot of sense there. Water because the moon controls the earth's tides, so water does make some degree of sense there. And then rock because the moon is basically just that. It's a hunk of rock that was thrown off of the earth when an asteroid collided millions of years ago. You get the idea. So, all three of those make sense. Dark Ice, Dark Water, Dark Rock all make sense in some degrees. Not Dark Rock as much because it's a bit of a boring type, but Dark Ice or Dark Water would make it be an interesting type change. There are also three other options, all including Fairy, which I think make a bit more sense because back in Generation 6, when Fairy was first introduced, a lot of the moves about Fairy are related to the moon. We have Moon Blast. Moonlight is now a Fairy type move. It seems like Nintendo or Game Freak is relating the moon to the Fairy type in some degree. It might not go as far as to class the Moon Legendary as a Fairy type, but there are some strong links there. So these three types I'm suggesting here are Dark Fairy, Ice Fairy and Rock Fairy. So having there was being I wouldn't expect Fairy to be the primary type, it will be a secondary one. But Dark Fairy, Ice Fairy, Rock Fairy all seem to have good ones as well. Dark because the moon's dark, Ice because it's cold, and then Rock because it's a hunk of rock, and also Fairy is what they're relating to the moon. What types would work well in tandem with the Fire Legendary? Well, the Fire Legendary, we had obviously Fire Fairy and Fire Psychic. If we had Fire Fairy, we would assume maybe Dark Water or Dark Rock, because you have Fire being strong against you have Fairy being strong against the Dark type section, and then Water or Rock being strong against the Fire type, so it would balance each other out. If it was Fire Psychic, you would assume maybe having, Fire Psychic, something like Dark Fairy-ish. Fire does have some sort of level of a Fairy. It's not super effective, but it does have an edge. And then obviously Dark is super against Psychic backwards. Rock Fairy also works isn't quite as much, since obviously it's just Rock is just super effective against the Sun, and then there's nothing to come back. But Ice Fairy would also work because Fire against Ice. If we, it depends how Game Freak go about it. They can either say, okay, let's level out these legendaries, make them have equal footing, or they could say, well, the sun is actually more powerful than the moon. Let's make the sun have a slight advantage over the moon. In which case, Ice Fairy might be a possibility because then, Fire against Ice and Fairy, and then Ice and Fairy against, for example, Psychic, which would make any sense, or wouldn't be super effective. So it depends where Game Freak's going, but all of those are possible types in my opinion. The ability for the Moon Legendary, there's not really any existing abilities I could really fit onto a Moon Legendary, so I really just left that blank. But obviously the new Night ability I'm predicting here, which would boost the power of this Pokemon during the night because of the moon power, whatever you might want to call it, lunar power, lunar ability, something along those lines. I don't know, something crazy like that. And then the stats for the Moon Legendary. This one seems like more of a defensive sort of Pokemon or Legendary, so having high defense and special defense and then a lower attack stat. This makes a lot of sense because obviously the sun in the sky, it's hot, it's burning, it fires out particles and radiation all across the solar system, and but it is in the end of it, the sun is a very unstable, not really unstable, but it could go at any time. It doesn't take long, it doesn't take much. As soon as it starts producing iron, the sun is gone. Not saying that steel is going to be super effective against it at all, but you get the idea. As soon as a star starts producing iron, eventually it's going to die because it's going to run out of fuel. So it's not. It's a very. I don't want to say fragile because it's not, but it's it's not very. It's not solid, I guess, because it's not solid. It's a load of gas. Whereas the moon, it just sits in the sky and goes around, doesn't do anything apart from control our tides. So it makes sense having a lot more defenses and not really as much attack. Speed could also be slightly lower, but I wouldn't expect it to be too low since, it is still moving in some respects. So that's the Moon Legendary. Again, let me know what you think about these ideas and let me know any of your own down below in the comment section. Now we have one more to look at here, which is a predicted final member of the trio. I would expect there to be one, and this would either be an Eclipse-based Legendary, because obviously Sun, Moon, and the Eclipse is sort of the middle, or an Earth Legendary, i.e. you have the Sun, you have the Moon, what's something that relates to both of them? Oh yes, the Earth. It's a bit of a stretch, that one, because obviously we have Pokemon related to the Earth already, like Zygarde and Rayquaza, controlling the atmosphere and the ecosystem, all the, whatever you want to call it. Having a Pokemon for the whole Earth might seem a bit weird, but I guess it is possible. And obviously this fan art is completely like, it's not, that's not going to happen obviously, but it's just the only thing I could find that actually related to it. So what typing could it be? Well, if it's an Eclipse Legendary, I would assume it's going to be a mix of the types from both the Sun Legendary and the Moon Legendary. So we could see a Fire Ice type, a Fairy Dark type, or a Fire Fairy type. Obviously Fire from the Sun, Ice from the Moon, Fairy from the Sun if it's a Fire Fairy, or Dark from the Moon if it's a Dark. Well, obviously it is going to be Dark type, and then Fire from the Sun, and then Fairy from the Moon if of course it is a Fairy type Legendary. If it's an Earth-based Legendary, I would expect it being Ground, Grass, or Rock Grass. Ground and Grass make a lot of sense, since obviously the ground, and then grass being plants and such, which would make sense because then you'd have Fire possibly, water, Fire on the Sun Legendary, Water on the Moon Legendary, and Grass on the Earth, which would have a sort of a trio there in your Legendaries. And whether it's Ground or Rock, I feel like Ground would look a lot better, but Rock is just there as another option. Then the ability for this Legendary here. If it's an Eclipse Legendary or even an Earth Legendary, it could be a negation ability, basically similar to Zygarde saying, okay, when I'm about, none of you are going to get extra power because I am the Eclipse. I am, maybe even if it's the Eclipse Legendary, it could be something like it lowers the powers of these two Legendaries because it's the Eclipse. So the Eclipse covers the Sun, and obviously sometimes the Moon covers the Sun. I know, but you can have a lunar eclipse as well. So it would make a lot of sense if it was negating and stuff there. Or it could be some sort of gravity-like ability if it's the Earth Legendary, because gravity-like, something to lower, bring all flying type Pokemon to the ground. I don't know. It was an idea. I don't really know what else you'd do for an Earth type Legendary. If you have any ideas, let me know. But stats for the Earth Legendary or the Eclipse Legendary, I would expect it to have a high attack stat, as in physical attack, and a high physical defense stat as well, because obviously it's the Earth. It's pretty bulky. But I would expect it, whatever it to have low speed, to be like this very slow thing, because the Earth, yes, okay, in terms, relative to us, the Earth does not move much, okay? The Sun moves, around our planet once a day, I guess, from relative to us, and the Moon obviously moves about the same. In reality, obviously, the Earth is moving around the Sun is staying still, but, relative to us, on the Earth does not move. So having a low speed for the Earth would make a bit of sense in my opinion. I just think it would fit, to have the Sun being this nice speedy and high attacking Pokemon, for the Moon to be a big bulky one, and then for the final, the Trio Master, I guess, to be this sort of slow, bulky, physically attacking Pokemon, just to balance all three of them out. But those are sort of all my ideas there, guys. If you have any ideas of yourself on either the Sun Legendary, the Moon Legendary, or of course this Eclipse or Earth Legendary, what do you think the final member of the trio is going to be? Let me know, what you think about typings, abilities, and stats, all down below in the comment section. And you can talk about designs as well. I haven't touched on designs in this video because they're sort of best fitted for other ones. This is more just about the actual, not the concept, but the physical stuff behind the Legendaries. If you have any ideas, let me know down below. But for now, this is going to be it for me for today. I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.